of writing this, I haven't checked out the Wicked book series, or the theatrical movie yet. This is making reference to just the stage musical. The core of Wicked is a meaningful but tragic friendship between Glinda and Elphaba. Glinda is an overachiever, the prettiest, the most popular, and the girl who usually gets everything she wants. She feels lost when she's not just handed the position for Wizard's Apprentice. The same headmaster dresses her down in public. Her abilities are weak, and she'd never live up to the qualities needed for the role. While Glinda benefits from pretty privilege and natural charisma, she's seen as just her looks and nothing more. She works to maintain her image and social standing, but she doesn't know if someone legitimately likes her for her, or only likes her at surface level. The headmaster's harsh comments slice to the core of Glinda's character. She wants to be acknowledged and understood on a deeper level. She wants to know that she's capable and hardworking, that she can live up to more than just her shallow image, that she's worthy of all the love and adoration she receives. In stark contrast, Elphaba has been looked down on and belittled by everyone in her life because of her green skin. She's underestimated, feels invisible, inferior. She has to work harder than others for any ounce of recognition, and still feels undeserving despite earning something or having a genuine connection with someone else, romantic or otherwise. As a whole, Wicked explores the consequences behind the fever pitch of a fascistic regime in Oz. Elphaba herself can be read as an allegory for queer people, ex-Mormons, people of color experiencing racism, or anyone else that feels othered by an existing system with a very specific vision for what the ideal person is and what model behavior looks like. Rising tensions lead to anthropomorphic or speaking animals like Dr. Dillamond being stripped of their rights and autonomy in full view of a grossly apathetic public. Dillamond and his colleagues are forcibly removed from teaching positions, careers, and having any presence in society because they are literally seen as less than human, let alone sapient beings. The metaphors aren't subtle, it's blatant, it's powerful, and it works. In a nutshell, Dillamond is a scapegoat and the hanging guillotine of the question, who's next? His fate acts as a counterbalance to Elphaba's budding friendship with Glinda. For a moment, Elphaba still believes there's a place for her in the existing system because of her newfound talent/affinity for magic that grants her prestige and social power she's never held before. These feelings are further validated when Glinda, the peak of social desirability, also shows genuine interest in befriending her. Her belief in society at large is completely demolished after she discovers the truth about the wizard. Ultimately, the wizard is viewed as a benevolent, generous, and larger-than-life figure that makes dreams come true. He's a guiding light for a more utopian society, and because of how powerful he is as an icon, his role and influence in politics is easily separated from draconian policies and political unrest. Elphaba is convinced that all she has to do is ask, and he'll fix the problems facing citizens like Dillamond. Instead, the wizard really is just smoke and mirrors. He only wants her as a means to sustain his role as a powerful leader and maintain the current status quo, where Elphaba leaves society completely and becomes a covert one-woman resistance movement. Glinda stays and becomes the polished PR figure and go-between for the wizard's machinations. She's grossly conflicted and manages to hide that she knows something about Elphaba after Elphaba escapes. It also takes her longer to pinpoint what about society is broken. She hasn't been burned in the same openly bigoted way Elphaba has. Glinda has benefited heavily from the existing social system. As someone that not just believed in, but benefited from it, she takes longer to disentangle herself from her broken worldview and an increasingly corrupted system. Despite obvious proof to the contrary, she believes that the system can be fixed from within. If she makes compromises, she can keep the status quo as well as create a comfortable space for Elphaba, if only she'd return. Supposedly, she can have her cake and eat it too. Fiyero serves as an interesting complement to Glinda's and Elphaba's respective character stories. When he starts dating Glinda, he's a reflection of how shallow and ignorant Glinda starts out. The two are content dancing through life with little thought or consideration for the existing history of Oz or self-improvement. Fiyero's cavalier attitude results in him getting kicked out of schools. He can skate by on looks and reputation alone. He's more likely to get second chances just because of who he is. Besides the headmaster's opinion of her, Glinda has mostly skated by on her looks and reputation. Fiyero is more a boost to her status and general morale because of how pretty they look together. When Fiyero plays off of Elphaba, it shows a surprisingly sweet, considerate side of his character, as well as emphasizes how earnest, compassionate, and selfless Elphaba is. Fiyero's breakup with Glinda is messy and brusque, but his developing romance with Elphaba reflects Elphaba finally coming into her own and showing stronger confidence and conviction. She takes something for herself after years of ignoring her wants, needs, and self in the endless quest to avoid making others uncomfortable. Fiyero himself grows beyond his surface-level image. He falls in love with Elphaba as he works on better understanding her situation and a desire to help push against a corrupt system. In a nutshell, Glinda is a figure of someone struggling to understand her privilege, how the same privilege made her more of an idea than an individual person, and the further problems with the system that gave her said privilege. Elphaba is a tragic figure that desperately wanted to fit into a system, kept getting rejected, and was so betrayed by said system that she started defying it both out of self-preservation and sheer necessity. Glinda and Elphaba became friends despite coming from very different worlds. Elphaba was the first person to see through Glinda's glamour and show honest support towards and encouragement for her goals as an individual, rather than just as an image. She finds the strength to kick out the wizard, as well as start rebuilding Oz, because of Elphaba's influence. Despite their circumstances, Glinda was the first person that loved Elphaba unconditionally. Because of Glinda, Elphaba finds the strength to love herself and become who she wants to be despite pressure from society at large to be something else. The tragedy is that despite Glinda rooting out the more corrupt leaders in the Emerald City, the propaganda against Elphaba was effective enough that Oz will never be safe again. While Wicked takes place in a fantastical setting, the story has very real depictions of the consequences and aftermath of a culture that's deeply steeped in a mix of colonialism and fascism. There's some echo of Glinda and Elphaba between Enid and Elodie from OKKO. Both aspire to enroll at Point Prep to become strong heroes. Though where Glinda comes from a privileged background and easily gets everything she wants, both Enid and Elodie come from Lakewood. It's illustrated through more visual cues and dialogue, but Lakewood is equated to low-income communities and small towns. There's limited opportunities here. There's some fear of getting stuck and stagnating. Point Prep is a window to hopefully bigger and better opportunities elsewhere. Enid is on a similar wavelength to her colleague Sparko. Point Prep is a means to an end. She doesn't have a specific vision or hope for her future. What she does know is that she doesn't want her background to define who she is and what she's capable of. This is similar to Elphaba not giving immediate consideration to the potential of becoming the wizard's apprentice. She enthusiastically embraces the opportunity in the hopes that she'll finally be accepted by others and have some chance at normalcy. In stark contrast, Elodie has a very specific goal and vision for her future. She grew up watching the heroic feats of Chip Damage, and aspires to become a beacon of hope and role model like he was for her. Dr. Grayman sets the stage for what the hero landscape looked like after Laser Blast's death and the public losing faith in Point. As far as regular civilians knew, Point was a chaotic and disorganized mess. They couldn't be trusted with the health and safety of Point members, let alone the public en masse. Chip Damage was an attempt at a rebrand. He became a living icon, the image of what the ideal hero looked like. He inspired hope. He encouraged the upcoming generation to follow in his footsteps and become heroes themselves. Chip's example led to Elodie looking at Point Prep as a penultimate segue from amateur to the next greatest hero the world had ever seen. Point Prep was a means for Enid. Point Prep was a destination for Elodie. Becoming the wizard's apprentice was the next logical step for Glinda in her journey as a beloved, appreciated, and glamorous social figure. Becoming her unique take on Chip Damage was Elodie's entire life goal. Elodie and Enid's friendship starts with Elodie showing genuine appreciation for and interest in Enid's abilities. She's good at pretending she's more skilled morally than otherwise, but it's a mask. They have an earnest and sweet relationship. They gel in an organic way. This also illustrates the caring and considerate part of Elodie's personality. The pomp and dazzle of her image is a tool for reassuring people. It's not just presentation, it's a staple in earning someone's trust more easily. Enid is probably the only person that's seen the real and vulnerable side of Elodie before the later events of the Point Prep arc and Dark Plaza. Glinda and Elphaba start becoming close because Elphaba leverages her position as the most promising candidate for Wizard's Apprentice to enroll Glinda in the training she wanted. There's a competition for a full-ride scholarship at Point Prep. Enid and Elodie enter with the assumption that there's a mutual understanding of, and support for, may the more skilled hero win. Enid fully intends to keep their friendship regardless of the end result. She deeply values anyone that sees and loves her genuine self. While her parents are generally loving and supportive, they have criticized her desire to be a ninja so harshly that she hides her preferred outfit and weapons at home. She had an ambiguous amount of time where she was a witch full-time at school and home, holding on to dreams and stories until she switched to public school. The ability to explore her true self, even just part-time, was enough that Enid felt hopeful enough to take a chance on both Elodie and Rad. Unfortunately, both Rad and Elodie hurt and betrayed her trust in a way that she closes back up for years after. Enid wants to be recognized and accepted as her full self by her parents and friends alike. This is roughly comparable to Elphaba's struggle as a black sheep in the family, an unwarranted reputation as a social pariah. All she wants is to be seen and recognized as a full human being despite her green complexion. She generally poses as a wallflower, and makes herself small to avoid any more commotion than she gets by just existing. Elphaba starts opening up and becoming her true self when someone finally recognizes and accepts her as a person despite her outer appearance. In Enid's case, she starts learning to trust and be vulnerable around others again when Rad, her parents, and Elodie show real attempts to apologize and make amends. She also learns how much she started relying on snark and sarcasm as an extra defense mechanism. She anticipates others taking potshots at her interests, or who lies under her cool facade. If she strikes first, then they don't have the opportunity to hurt her. When she and Rad are on better speaking terms, he feels like he can call her out on this and ask her to course correct. Granted, Enid closed up as a result of getting hurt by two different people taking drastic measures to uphold and furnish very specific masks for themselves. Rad leans into toxic masculinity and tries to neg her on their first date. He's convinced that he looks cooler and far more desirable if he's an obnoxious jerk with big muscles. The hyper-masculine image keeps his friends. He's too insecure to openly acknowledge his more feminine interests, let alone that he's a very emotional and sensitive person. Where Enid faced pressure at home to match her family's cultural background and traditions, Rad feels embarrassed by his parents and falls prey to general social pressure around gender roles in a patriarchal system. Rad starts connecting with and more easily talking to Enid when he opens up. He finally meets Enid's vulnerability years later, and that's what makes their friendship work. Elodie was placed in a situation where she felt like she had a very black and white choice between Enid and her ambition. Capitalism exists in this fantasy world. The Point Prep competition stems from a system that heavily relies on creating scarcity and fostering tense competition between persons. There's only one spot at Point Prep. Elodie is thoroughly convinced that she has to fight for that spot, and as a result, push others out of her way. Her personal role model, Chip Damage, is also depicted as a height of individualism and how powerful one person should be. Point started as a team effort that relied on mutual trust and collaboration. When Point pivoted towards showcasing Chip Damage as their poster boy, shameless advertising and merchandising included, Point became backup or supporting players to one star player. The new model relies on Chip and Chip alone. He is Point. This paints Elodie's worldview. She has to be ready to shoulder the lion's share of challenges and obstacles that come with professional heroics. She can't be vulnerable or lower her guard. Rather than seeing her friendship with Enid as a strength, it becomes an obstacle. If Enid makes her feel vulnerable, it means Elodie has a direct, exploitable weakness. This mindset is the cornerstone of why Elodie sees Enid as a rival and treats her with passive-aggressive hostility. Elodie's struggle is further echoed by Foxtail. In Wicked, the wizard starts as a well-meaning guide and starts reshaping Oz to his preferred vision and standards as he becomes more powerful and influential. He's a direct comparison to historical events like British colonizers coming to the United States and forcing the existing populace to conform to their culture, standards, and way of life. That said, OKKO explores a very different fascistic figure with Foxtail. After Laser Blast dies and Point starts scrambling, Foxtail installs herself as an immediate leader with designs on building an effective, uniformed fighting team. Her recruits need to fit her specific idea of what a powerful, effective hero looks like. Chip Damage is the template. Recruits have to be self-sufficient and a capitalist pull yourself up by the bootstraps respect. They're expendable and replaceable in the vision of meeting a greater good. The Wizard shapes society with a mix of propaganda, soft power, and bringing in a violent authoritarian hand against anyone that challenges his societal designs. Foxtail steps in and directly confronts whatever she considers a direct threat or obstacle. Chip Damage is propaganda, but he's propaganda directed at an ideal for people to meet versus a specific figure people rely on. Chip entices new recruits to conform and enforce. The Wizard enforces complacency and dependency. When Enid becomes disillusioned with Point Prep, she has a support network back in Lakewood to return to. There's emphasis on how much stronger Enid is because of Rad, KO, and Mr. Gar. She can openly express her thoughts and concerns with KO and Rad. She's on even footing and standing with her mentor and teammates at the bodega. Mr. Gar benefits from his students as much as they benefit from his experience and feedback. The key difference between Mr. Gar's more independent training and Point Prep is his tailored, individualized approach with KO, Rad, and Enid. Everyone receives equal attention and is encouraged to learn at a rate or pace that fits them. Point Prep has specific standards for students to meet. This is blatantly abused by Foxtail threatening failing grades when students don't meet her expectations or follow her orders. There's also Chip's exclusive classes for advanced students. Only those few that meet Foxtail's vision for the ideal hero receive a special power-up that gives them a brief burst of extra power. This is triggered by the need to win or competition period. Elodie is the highest achiever and the most popular student at Point Prep. She's part of this exclusive group of students. While she does help Enid disarm and stop Chip Damage, it's equal parts in hopes to salvage their friendship and to rescue the integrity of Point Prep as an institution. Similarly to Glinda staying next to the Wizard even after discovering the truth of the man behind the curtain, Elodie believes in the standing history and infrastructure behind Point. She won her spot, but she's worked hard to further cultivate and maintain her position. She honestly believes that she can fix existing issues by sticking around and working within the existing system. Unplugging Chip Damage and pumping the brakes on secret society meetings was only the tip of the iceberg. Foxtail is still in charge, and while Chip acted as MC at events or taught a few classes, Foxtail is the connective tissue between students like Elodie and their significant overall progress within Point. Everyone, including Chip, were cogs carefully installed and set in motion according to Foxtail's machinations, only allowed to stay or get discarded by her final word. Elodie continues to follow Foxtail's orders, albeit begrudgingly, because in that moment, Foxtail is Point. Point managed to capture the imagination of someone like Elodie. Chip Damage helped redeem public trust. He was key in painting a very idealistic vision of the Point pipeline. Get recruited, go to Point Prep, become a successful hero. Point is only as successful as someone believes they are. Foxtail lost faith in the previous way Point operated, though she still believes that Point can be a strong and powerful institution that just needs redirection. She seizes control and forces recruits to conform, comply, and enforce her will because she doesn't trust in anyone's abilities or intuition as an individual. Conversely, Elodie believes and trusts Point as an institution to the degree she overlooks her reservations and concerns. She sank so much of herself and her convictions into the system that it's difficult to question the possibility it isn't working. Point holds her imagination hostage. Her future, the potential of other heroes, and what the world looks like rely on Point as a lens to look at and evaluate these things through. Originally, Elodie follows through with Foxtail's extreme measures because she's more convinced by Foxtail and Point than Enid and the Plaza at large. While she did join Enid to stop Chip, she also chose to remain at and stand by Point after the fact. When Elphaba originally asked Glinda to run away with her, Glinda refuses because she sees and even describes Elphaba's behavior as delusions of grandeur. Glinda understands how much more self-realized Elphaba becomes outside of Oz's restrictive system, but she doesn't understand the full picture of exactly how incompatible she is with what creates Oz's status quo, especially with the more radical ideas she has. The disconnect is that either one would be sacrificing a large part of their personal values and sense of self to follow the other's lead. Glinda would have to completely reinvent herself. Elphaba would be compromising on things that are absolutely non-negotiable now. Thankfully for Enid and Elodie, they aren't tragically incompatible. When Elodie sees a resistance force in Dark Plaza, it's a real tangible example of what she was looking for and hoping to build at Point. Enid and other Plaza residents show a group of very different individuals coming together and collaborating as an effective, multi-pronged team. There isn't one specific person in charge or strict uniforms. It's teamwork that echoes what Point looked like before chip damage. Seeing a real-world effect that changes Foxtail's point is enough to give Elodie that extra nudge to defy Foxtail. She was scared of a world without Point. It's a significant part of her moral compass and world perspective. Authoritarian Point on par with villains and confidence in what support she could find with the Plaza is enough to push against Foxtail regardless. Honestly, Dark Plaza is more of an introduction to what kinds of themes and social issues Wicked tackles. Foxtail is portrayed as a redeemable, sympathetic figure. Point's corruption is effectively diffused because Foxtail surrenders, presumably starts unpacking the grief and trauma that kick-started her authoritarian campaign, and pass the reins to Elodie as a kinder, more understanding, and effective leader. The hanging question after Elodie takes charge is how to address the existential hole that Chip Damage leaves behind. Chip himself reveals that he was just smoke and mirrors. He chooses to tell the world that they can and will persist without such heavy reliance on a Superman. Overall, OKKO places emphasis on the importance of a strong support system, that it's okay to ask for help, found family, and messages about the power of community. Killing Chip Damage is one of the bigger gut punch scenes for this message. He's never a fully actualized character. He remains an image and an idea. Elodie and KO encourage the disgruntled crowd to love themselves. In effect, a strong community consists of people that love their neighbors as well as themselves. Your strengths are just as important to the bigger picture as someone else's shoulder to lean on. Elodie plans to restructure and rework Point, but Enid does not see a place for herself there. She's still figuring out what she wants to do next, and the Plaza is better fitting interim space for her values, approach to training, and otherwise. Head of Point Prep is the best end result for Elodie, period. So much of her character rests on her wanting to be a role model and encourage other upcoming heroes. Her current role is more direct and hands-on than just echoing Chip Damage could be. She had some hand in rehabilitating Foxtail. She already defies existing prejudices about Lakewood heroes as a former Lakewood resident herself, and has more say and input on how Point Prep programs work. Given how much friendlier she is with Enid, Elodie could direct hero hopefuls to the bodega if Point Prep isn't a good fit for their respective abilities and interests. Glinda and Elphaba end on a very bittersweet note that they had a strong impact in each other's lives and love each other unconditionally, but can never see the other again in large part due to forces outside of their control. Enid and Elodie repaired their friendship, but they have a very new, different dynamic. They aren't as close as before. They can't be quite as intimate as they once were, but they have figured out how to agree to disagree on certain topics, respect each other's opinions, and actually value the other's insights or intuition on given topics. In a nutshell, it's interesting to look at these sets of characters, how they live in / navigate the societal systems they live in, and how that affects their respective relationships.